Good afternoon, everyone. The meeting for the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure will now come to order. Will the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Here.
Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am here. Assemblyman Ellison will be running a little late. Please mark him present when he arrives, and I will inform you. And if I forget, please forgive me, but I will try to inform you as soon as I see his face pop up on the screen. Today, we will be hearing one bill, and we'll have a work session. For the public watching, the building remains closed. Everything that we're doing is virtual. And this meeting is starting a little bit earlier than our normal scheduled time because we're kind of at a crunch time. You will notice as our agendas are posted for next week, they will be at the call of the chair. The latest we will be getting started will be at 1 p.m. That will be the latest. I'm hoping to be able to get in a little earlier, but all the committees are making adjustments, trying to get bills out, work sessions completed. So please bear with us and be flexible and understanding as we make the changes. So with that, I will open today's hearing on Assembly Bill 379, which will be presented by one of our fellow committee members. Assemblyman Miller, whenever you are ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I am C.H. Miller, representing Assembly District 7 within Clark County, and I'm here today to present Assembly Bill 379 for the committee's consideration. While presenting another measure before this committee last week, Assembly Bill 301, which revises provisions related to towing of motor vehicles, I made reference to numerous reasons why vehicle registration decals, or the stickers, as they're commonly known, can be problematic methods of identifying current vehicle registration status and can create other issues for vehicle owners. During the hearing for AB 301, we heard from representatives from the Department of Motor Vehicles who explained that current vehicle registration and insurance status is maintained on a searchable real-time database that has updated the monitoring process from 1960 technology to meet the needs of the information age. Now, while consulting with members of Nevada's law enforcement community, I received varying responses to the idea of what AB 379 will do, which I'm sure will be expressed in the public testimony today. What was consistent throughout all of my conversations is that vehicle registration stickers are not always used to verify vehicle registration status. Rather, these verifications are typically conducted by law enforcement officers in their vehicles using their information terminals or by requesting verification of this information by radio before they, oftentimes before they even make a decision to engage a particular vehicle for a traffic stop. Both the DMV and the majority of Nevada's law enforcement community, the two primary stakeholders invested in this monitoring, in vehicle registration monitoring, have made a lot of updates and moved forward towards not depending on those stickers and more so depending on electronic needs or measures. This bill is perfectly in keeping with the DMV's modernization project, which was presented to this committee during a previous meeting. Since stickers are no longer the most reliable indicator of current vehicle registration status, this can result in issues for vehicle owners and require a cost, and they require a cost to produce and distribute them, which AB 379 proposes to eliminate altogether. Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and 3 Canadian provinces have already eliminated vehicle registration stickers and realized savings ranging from $400,000 on up to $12 million in cumulative savings between January 2017 and 2021, as reported to me by Deputy Director David Lepadet, Officer of Legislative Affairs within the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. In Pennsylvania specifically, both PennDOT, customers, and the Pennsylvania State Police have reported that they vastly prefer the elimination of vehicle registration stickers to the alternative. Now that that state is 4 years out from their elimination, I believe that the DMV is looking into So since they're 4 years out from the elimination, that is what they have been able to discover from their customers, as well as the PennDOT, the Pennsylvania State Police. I believe the DMV is looking into potential savings that Nevada could realize by following suit, and we'll have that information presented today. I am thankful to staff at the DMV and members of Nevada's law enforcement agencies statewide who have shared their insight, information, and input with me. I am joined today by Dr. Frank R. Baumgartner. Please forgive me for mispronouncing your name, sir. Department of Political Science, a political scientist affiliated with the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Now, he's analyzed data related to traffic stops due to expired vehicle registrations vehicle registration stickers. With that, I will now invite Dr. Baumgartner to discuss his research findings and the implication of law enforcement activities on drivers and law enforcement officers.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you so much for having me. I can be relatively simple. I'm not an expert on license tags, but I did write a book about traffic stops and the racial dynamics of traffic stops. And in particular, we looked at the odds that a given driver would be searched following a traffic stop. And I published a book in 2018 entitled Suspect Citizens: What 20 Million Traffic Stops Tell Us About Policing and Race. That book was based on an analysis of every traffic stop in North Carolina since 2002, about 20 million traffic stops at the time. And I just want to give you a quick summary. Now we're up to about 24 million traffic stops. North Carolina was the first state in the nation to mandate the collection of traffic stop data. So it's a very rich data collection. And very briefly, North Carolina mandates that the officer fill out a form. The form lists 9 reasons for the traffic stop. And I've provided to the committee a quick 1-page summary of some highlights that I would just want to mention. But among the 9 reasons why a state trooper or a police officer might pull over a vehicle, the most common is speeding. There might be a drunk driving violation, suspected, running through a stop sign. But 2 of them that are quite relevant, the one that's most relevant, of course, is what's called regulatory traffic stops, which mostly is expired tags. And then also similar to that in their dynamics are equipment violations, which is mostly known as broken taillights or cracked taillights. I just want to mention the racial differences in the traffic stops and then in the searches that result from those stops based on the stop purpose. And I'd be happy to answer your questions, but I just want to read you some numbers, so I'll put my glasses on. Overall in North Carolina, with 24 million traffic stops, about 57% of those traffic stops were of white drivers and 32% were of black drivers. Now, North Carolina's population is about 22% African American. So you can see that overall, black drivers are significantly overrepresented in the traffic stops compared to their population numbers. But that differs depending on the type of stop. In speeding violation stops, blacks are 29%, of the traffic stops, and whites are 62%. For regulatory traffic stops, blacks are 40% of the stops, and whites are 51% of the stops. For equipment violations, AKA broken taillights, blacks are 40%, 39.5%, so almost 40% of the traffic stops, and white drivers are 49% of the stops. So you can see a greater likelihood that regulatory violations are going to target the poor. You can't see that, but I can tell you that it's more likely to target the poor. And in particular, with regards to race, it's more likely to target African Americans, at least in North Carolina. Similarly, if we look at the searches that result from these traffic stops, when it's a speeding traffic stop, searches are very unlikely. Searches only occur about 1% of the time following a speeding violation. Now that's 1.6% of the time for black drivers and 0.7% of the time for white drivers. So the black drivers are significantly more likely to be searched following a traffic stop for speeding, but most speeding violations don't lead to a search. When it's a regulatory violation, that is an expired tag or something similar, the overall search rate is 3.5%. But for blacks, it's just over 5%. And for whites, it's just over 2%. So there's a similar racial disparity, but the numbers are significantly higher with regards to regulatory expired tag traffic stops. And then finally, equipment violation stops lead to search about 5% of the time. But for African Americans, it's almost 7%. And for whites, it's about 3.5%. So blacks are twice as likely to be searched in those cases. So I could go on and read you all kinds of statistics, but I think the point I wanted to lay out for the committee is a very simple one. North Carolina has been collecting traffic stop statistics for longer than any other state. It's a very large data collection. It may or may not be relevant to exactly what's happening or what would happen in Nevada, but I think that most likely eliminating or reducing the number of investigatory traffic stops, regulatory traffic stops, expired tags, would have a positive impact on racial disparities in traffic stops and in the searches that result from them. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Obviously, my research is mostly based in other states. I don't think Nevada collects the kind of traffic stops data that I typically analyze. So I would encourage you to do so.
May I continue, Chair?
Yes, please.
Assemblyman C.H. Miller, for the record. Thank you, Dr. Baumgartner, for that information and for your work in this area. I'd also like to just note that traffic stops, as we know, are some of the most dangerous encounters also for law enforcement officers. So if we're able to kind of curb unnecessary stops, I think it's an overall better equation for everyone involved. And that's one of the things that this bill is aimed to do. Also, with a couple of the amendments that have been presented that were sent out this morning and uploaded to Analyst. Those two amendments, the first would eliminate the requirement for the issuance and display of a front license plate on vehicles, which 19 other states have already done. Existing law already provides an exemption to the requirement to a front license plate if a motor vehicle is not manufactured to include a bracket, device, or other contrivance to display and secure a front license plate, and if the manufacturer does not provide such a device. So it's already exempted. What we would be looking to do with this provision is not require the DMV to send two plates. The goal there would be to increase savings to the DMV as they move towards more modernization and better efficiency. The second amendment is designed to reduce, and that's also designed to reduce waste. So now the second amendment will allow for businesses with fleet vehicles, such as short-term lessors, rental car agencies, to issue new license plates for their vehicles once they receive them. This will reduce or eliminate new fleet vehicles being placed into service without having actual license plates. Now, the way that it works, the rental car companies, they get new cars and they're able to put a permit on the window. It's a little 10-day, well, I remember it from when I first started driving as a 10-day sticker, but it's a little permit that allows the vehicle to be out on the road. However, the rear license plate area does not have a license plate at all, not even a placard that we are required to have when we buy a brand new car. And so if you can imagine, this also leaves our tourist community open to being pulled over just based on the fact of them not having the rear license plate. So this amendment would allow the rental car agencies and other businesses that have fleet vehicles to, the way I understand it, enter the information in the DMV's portal, and then there would be, they would have a stack of plates that they could automatically distribute. We have Mr. Matt Walker on the call to be able to answer questions as it relates to that. In closing, I would just like to keep everything as brief as possible because, you know, I can be long-winded. So I would like to urge the committee's support of AB 379. This measure will align Nevada's laws with current DMV and law enforcement practices, improve convenience and equity for vehicle owners, realize efficiencies in Nevada's vehicle registration process, and preserve state funds that would otherwise be used to produce and distribute redundant stickers. At this time, Madam Chair, I would be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Miller. And 10 days, you're kind of showing your age there, sir. So we do have a few questions in the queue. We'll start with Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, since we went through a lot of data, and I appreciate the Dr. Baumgartner. So we're talking about registration, and I would assume the purpose of this bill is to alleviate any registrations that are valid but not actively displayed on the vehicle. Do you have any data that those vehicles that were pulled over for registration violations, do you have any data that shows what percentage of those were actually active registrants and just weren't displayed properly versus those that didn't have registration properly?
So unfortunately, I do not have data that speaks to that specifically, but I think that there may be somewhere in what the Nevada Transportation Authority, they may be able to provide some more insight on that, and I can get that information from them as they dealt a little more directly with vehicles that were identified as not being expired. As being expired when they were expired. Now that obviously does not relate to traffic stops, and I get that. But I'm assuming that maybe something in there could provide some insight that we could, all look into. And if not, I can also reach out to law enforcement and see if they have any data that they can share from that regard.
Thank you. I think that's important data due to that's kind of the purpose of the bill. And so I think that data is very important to know, even if it's just data from North Carolina or wherever it is, that we know, is this an issue? Are people being pulled over because they forgot to put their sticker on or whatever it may be? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next up, we have Assemblyman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions, if I may. I pulled over cars for 34 years, and I will tell you, you are correct that, of course, my eyesight wasn't always the best, and so I couldn't see the stickers. The number on them anyway. You just kind of learn the color of the year, but you always verified it, just like you said, with the computer. A lot of times prior to even pulling it over, and I can't think of hardly any departments that don't have that capability now. And there's a lot of states, as you said, we have a lot of transit folks that come to Nevada, and you got to learn each state. And there's a lot of states that don't have stickers, and everything's different. So I don't see an issue with it at all. I just have a couple of questions regarding the money savings. And maybe these are more for DMV than anybody else. So we're not going to be issuing any initial stickers, and you won't be issuing any renewal stickers. And so obviously on renewals, that's going to save you a significant amount of money, not only with the hard cost of stickers, but mail and everything else. What do you project the savings would be?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman C.H. Miller, for the record. I believe Mr. Seaver from DMV is on.
I am, yes.
Thank you.
If I may, Madam Chair. We are still at the it's Sean Sever from the DMV. We are still working on the fiscal note. We are almost finished with that. Obviously, there will be savings, but there are also costs with the DMV. As I've talked to everyone about, whenever we make a change to our old system, we have to include programming fees. And then also some of our paper stock in our kiosks, if we have to discard that, we might have to account for that as well. But anyway, we're working on it now, and I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Miller. He's been really good with us on his outreach, and we've been working with him on questions on this bill for a long time. Thanks.
And a follow-up, if I may. So if you do realize a certain amount of savings, would you adjust the fees that Nevadans pay for these, since we're not going to have the added expense of mail, we're not going to be printing stickers and things like that? Would we be able to pass that on to the consumer?
Sean Sever from the DMV. We do have a couple people on the phone call that can answer questions too, so I'm not sure. Tanya, do you want to take that one?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Tanya Laney, for the record, Field Services Administrator of the Nevada DMV. My understanding is we would, and again, we will be submitting a fiscal note once these numbers are finalized, but the information that we have ahead of time is that we would save on we would lose revenue initially on the decal collection of the fees for the actual decal itself, but we would see an immediate savings in contract cost from the vendor through being the contractor for those decals, which looks to show an immediate savings in the 21-22 biennium. That savings is even greater in 22-23. And then at this point in time, again, with rough numbers with the fiscal note not completed, approximately $532,000 in the future biennium moving forward after that. And that takes into consideration the loss of revenue from the decal in addition to the contract savings. So that's the final number after everything comes out in the wash.
And so that I'm clear, so you charge a separate fee for the decal now, and so people wouldn't pay that any longer?
Again, Tanya Laney, for the record, that is correct. The
Okay.
decal itself has a separate fee, and that's where we would lose and gain the numbers for that cost.
And I apologize, maybe I should know this. I don't look at my registration too closely, but what is that typically?
Again, Tanya Laney, for the record, I apologize. I would have to get you that information. I only have the total numbers here, and I apologize for not having that ready. I actually don't know what our cost is per decal, but we can get that information over to you.
Okay, and then Madam Chair, I'll let everybody else ask questions. Maybe I'll have another one, and maybe somebody will ask it. If not, if you would allow me to come back, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Assemblyman Roberts. I do have a question going along with that conversation. I too don't look at the breakdown of my registration bill when I get it. I just kind of cringe and pay it. So I assumed that the decal fee was included in the regular registration fee. Is it detailed on that list of what's on that registration when you get it? I thought it was all encompassing. So where would a consumer see where that specific fee is for the decal? And why have just the decal fee? Why was it not included in the total registration fee?
Again, thank you, Madam Chair. Tanya Laney for the record. If I remember correctly, our decal fee is included in the overall registration fee now. Where you would get where it's just the decal fee by itself is if you, for example, lost your decal and you're ordering a duplicate decal through the DMV or through the kiosk, then you would see that fee by itself. But upon original registration, I believe it's included in our registration fee as an all-inclusive cost for registering your vehicle and to get your plates and your decal.
Okay, so with that being said, would you then have to discount the original registration? So the only revenue, or would you not discount it and the only revenue you would be losing would be that lost decal fee?
Tanya Laney, again, for the record, Madam Chair, I believe that is correct, that the only revenue that we would be losing would be the cost of the decal itself, and that the registration fee would be representative of the cost of the plates and the taxes and everything that are involved with the registration minus what the decal cost would have been that was added in the registration fee previously.
Okay, thank you. I think we have next is Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a really interesting topic, in part because we've kind of been dealing with a scenario with the pandemic of not really enforcing this practice of pulling over for registration stickers, right? So I'm curious if someone on the line can answer what law enforcement has been doing since the pandemic with this, not using the stickers to pull people over, and how much of an impact that has made.
JD Decker for the record, Chief of the Compliance Enforcement Division for Nevada DMV. Through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblywoman Peters, thank you for the question. The department sent out a notice to Nevada sheriffs and chiefs at the beginning of the pandemic to be distributed to Nevada law enforcement agencies requesting some lenience in using the sticker as probable cause for a traffic stop, knowing that we weren't going to be able to process them and get them out to the public. We're still in that phase where we have a combination of people that have taken advantage of the pandemic and not registered their cars on time, and people that are having problems and still unable to get in and get their vehicles registered for legitimate reasons. So our understanding is that Nevada law enforcement is still somewhere in the middle of not using it for probable cause unless there are obvious circumstances. I hope that answers your question.
That answered part of it. The question still kind of remains of what impact that's had for law enforcement, and if they've seen any or collected data and assessed it at all. And I think it doesn't look like there's anybody on the line right now to answer that question, but if they come up in opposition or support testimony, Chair, would you mind if I asked that question of law enforcement?
That would be just fine.
Great, thank you.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, did you still have a question?
Thank you, ma'am, I do. Thank you, Chairwoman Monroe Moreno, and thank you, Assemblyman C.H. Miller, for this wonderful presentation. So proud, our freshman class, yes. I have a question for the folks at DMV about the single plate. Now, there should be somewhere, someone I hope has information about the cost of printing only one plate instead of two for cars going forward. So can anyone provide a dollar amount on that issue?
One versus two, cost.
Sure, Madam Chair, Sean Sever from the DMV. We will have to get back to you on that cost as well on the front license plate. As the amendment just came out, we just heard about that the other day, so we'll examine it and get back to you.
Mr. Seaver, can I just make a comment? when I have a bill that has a fiscal note from your department, you guys are extremely fast to get it to me, and you're a little slower when we need a fiscal note from you. Can we reverse that and you be super slow in getting us those fiscal notes on our bills? I would love that.
Sure.
I think we have Assemblyman Wheeler next.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong just asked the exact question I was going to ask. So, you're those freshmen and us seniors.
Members, any other questions for Assemblyman Miller or the presenters? Assemblyman Roberts, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And mine was more for, now we heard in another bill, it may not have been this committee, so I apologize, but where private property, for instance, security companies, tow companies, or whatever, can access DMV to find out if vehicles are truly valid, registration based on, if you're in an HOA or you have private property where a vehicle could be unregistered or left for an extended period of time. Without the sticker, they would need some way to try to verify that, so that you don't tag a car and remove it. That may have been in this committee that we talked about this. So is there a way for private companies to do that? And is that come at a cost to check that through DMV?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Roberts. C.H. Miller, Assemblyman Miller, for the record. So that would be the same website that the tow operators currently have access to. It's a public page on the DMV's website. Anyone can access it as long as they have the last four numbers of the VIN number and the license plate number, and it'll give them the most updated information.
Well, your memory is much better than mine. It might have even been your bill, right? So I thought it was a free service. And so thank you for the answer, and thank you for the additional question.
Members, any other questions? I see Mr. Walker on the screen. Was there anything you wanted to contribute to the testimony for this bill?
Madam Chair, Matt Walker for the record on behalf of Enterprise, and thank you for the opportunity. As I may not be able to dial back in for support, I just wanted to express our thanks to this bill sponsor, especially for Section 1, Sub 7 of the amendment that would enhance the permanent fleet registration program that was put into place by Assemblyman Yeager through Assembly Bill 177 from the last legislative session, and combine that with the existing authority of 482-293 to self-plate vehicles. We think this is going to be a tremendous win for industry, for DMV to not have to handle these requests, and for all of our tourists and visitors who come to our state and really get may have some trepidation or nervousness when they approach their car and see that there's no rear plates on their vehicle. We think this is a wonderful improvement, and greatly appreciate the opportunity to support the amendment today.
Thank you. And I see that Lieutenant Bowers is able to join us. Lieutenant Bowers, Assemblywoman Peters had a question earlier. I'm going to have her ask that question again, and hopefully you're able to answer it for her.
Yes, glad to.
Lieutenant, I was wondering, during the pandemic, as law enforcement has kind of relaxed their efforts of identifying and potentially pulling over people for their registration tags, have you guys seen or calculated the impact that has had on law enforcement?
We have not. We have not tabulated any sort of statistical data on any sorts of loss of revenue, because this is not in our purview at all. But we were asked, as it's been stated very early on, to ease up on enforcement with respect to that. It just wasn't reasonable for us to take enforcement action for registration violations when many people couldn't even get an appointment with the DMV. So we've still been operating under that to an extent. DMV has rallied in many respects. It's much easier to get an appointment. So some leniency, of course, is still being utilized. But, if a driver's encountered that, has been expired for, a very, very long period of time, they might still be cited or something for a registration violation now.
I have a follow-up, Chair.
Of course.
So have you experienced, even just qualitatively, any impact related to not having that particular method of pulling, like stopping folks as part of your traffic stops? Have you experienced any kind of negative impact?
Well, no, the initial correspondences that came out did not speak towards probable cause, meaning they didn't say, don't stop a car for this. A registration or a tag that's showing as expired would, of course, still be probable cause for a stop. But if you learn that that is the only issue at hand, it is highly likely that we would not take enforcement action. So it hasn't precluded officers from, being actively seeking out traffic violations and things of that nature.
Have you seen a reduction in the number of traffic violations because of it?
Not so much if you're talking about citations being issued to drivers when the early stages of the pandemic, yes, I mean, there was, we were trying to only limit our interactions with the public for, very serious traffic violations. Given that many of our staff is vaccinated now, we have responded in kind and started to re-intensify our efforts with enforcement and simply just do the job that we're employed to do now.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you for those responses.
Thank you. I believe Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong has a question for Dr. Baumgartner, and then I believe DMV has a statement to make.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Baumgartner, earlier one of the assembly persons asked if you might have some data on traffic stops in North Carolina. You have some wonderful and very complete data. Is there any extrapolation from that data that has to do with whether tags were truly expired, or and if so, if you could share that with us?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, and I'll follow the lead and say it's Frank Baumgartner for the record. We really don't have data on the enforcement actions that follow from the traffic stops. We just know why the traffic stop occurred and then what happened. Did the driver get a warning, a ticket, were they arrested? But we don't have the follow-up about whether the license was truly not registered.
Thank you for that information.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mr. Seaver?
Yes, Madam Chair, I just want to clarify the fiscal note. So we did submit an unsolicited fiscal note on the original bill, and that's what we're almost have completed. But we would have to take another look at the amendment, which we just learned about the other day. And our initial take on it is that if it was optional for people to use the front license plate, it really wouldn't have an effect on the DMV, because we'd still have to mail everybody 2 license plates. So it would be their option as to whether they use the 2 plates or not, if that makes sense.
And if this piece of legislation were to pass, then you would not have to print and mail 2 license plates, just one. So that would ultimately be a savings for the department, only having to print the one, or not necessarily print, but supply the 1 license plate as opposed to 2. So that would ultimately result in a savings, correct?
Madam Chair, Sean Sever from the DMV. Yes, ultimately it would. But in the meantime, it depends. If it enables the DMV to do that in the future, it would result in a savings. But for now, we have to still continue issuing the 2 plates.
Thank you. And Assemblyman Miller, I'm sure you want to respond.
Yes, thank you, Assemblyman C.H. Miller, for the record. And yes, just I guess a little more context around that. The goal is to allow the DMV to not have to issue the plate, because I understand that there are some contracts and agreements in place that if they were to abruptly end them, it would create a financial shortfall there. So the goal is to allow them to enable them to not have to issue the plates. So as they look forward to renegotiating certain contracts, they can consider not continuing to move both plates forward, and then hopefully realize more savings.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? All right, seeing none, we will ask our broadcast staff to see if we have any callers that are in the queue who wish to testify in support of Assembly Bill 379.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 379, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 725. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Manuel Moreno and committee members. This is Nick Sheepak, Nickshepak, here today on behalf of the ACLU and both the Washoe and Clark County Public Defender's Office in support of this legislation. We want to thank Assemblyman Miller for bringing forward this very logical and good piece of legislation. We believe that through the elimination of these tags, we will reduce unnecessary contact with the police. Now, as Assemblyman Roberts stated, the majority of stops do include the police double checking to make sure that the registration is indeed actually expired. But I have a slightly personal story where just a few months ago in Douglas County, my father was pulled over due to the fact that he didn't have the proper tag on his vehicle. Now, the officer did double check and found out he was indeed insured, but since he had started to pull him over, he kindly went over and let him know he needed his tag. He had to go through a bunch of rigmarole. It never showed up in the mail, and he had to go into the DMV during the pandemic in order to get the tags. This is just unnecessary at this point. We have plenty of technology to ensure that we don't have these accidental encounters with police, and it's a waste of time for everybody involved. So we believe that while we don't have all of the traffic stop data, there's a bill that will give us more data, and we can find out how many stops this may stop. It will decrease the contact between the community and the police, which is unnecessary, and will allow police officers to go about their jobs and run license plates as they normally would using the technology that they have. There's many reasons why an individual may not get their tag in the mail. They may have to move abruptly. We know there's an eviction crisis looming, and we know that people who often have the most difficult time registering their vehicles are lower income individuals. And any savings that this bill might bring to vehicle registration could also ease the burden among our most vulnerable populations. This bill seems like a very simple and clean bill that everyone should support, that would make everybody's life a little easier. And while we love our friends at the DMV, I think we can all agree if we had to go in a little less, we would all be a little happier. Thank you for your time, and we urge you to support this important piece of legislation.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 285. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Paul Klein, Paulklein of Tri-Strategies, testifying on behalf of the Nevada Police Union, which includes your statewide highway patrol officers. We appreciate Assemblyman C.H. Miller for this forward-thinking legislation that not only removes an outdated and archaic sticker system, but frees up millions of budget dollars that we'd like to see be reallocated to programs that improve public and traffic safety services. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us and for your comments. Next caller.
Chair, we have no more callers wishing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. Do we have any callers in the queue who wish to testify in opposition?
Testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 379. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 196. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please solely state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Eric Spratley, E-R-I-C-S-P-R-A-T-L-E-Y, for the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association. We're here in opposition to AB 379. This, folks, is a solution looking for a problem. While we recognize that the license plate decal system in Nevada and other states might not be ideal or without flaws, it's a very tried and true system that still works well in Nevada and surrounding states. It is and has been a very non-invasive method for quickly determining potential validity of a vehicle registration, and conversely, is a quick way to develop probable cause if that vehicle needs to be stopped, which has led to serious crimes being discovered and, yes, lives being saved. Yes, by the display of a registration sticker. Many law enforcement agencies have the ability to run license plate via a mobile computer terminal or through dispatch, but this is not always the option, especially in our rural, remote, and often even the congested urban environments. We ask you to consider our rural and remote locations. They can't always get on their MDT and punch a plate in or have access to radio traffic. Geography, radio traffic, cellular signals, and other factors play a part in technology not being available. So the display or lack thereof of a registration sticker is a key component in law enforcement operations on a daily basis. It sounds silly, but it's true. It's not always about making the traffic stop, but also about not making a traffic stop. It's about public service for our amazing frontline officers, troopers, and deputies. We are Nevada, not North Carolina. And while this legislative body is going after law enforcement operations this legislative session, the data presented in this hearing is information for that state and not Nevada, with our unique and significant demographic makeup. All of our neighboring states have license plate stickers on their license plates because they work, they're efficient, and they're standard. There were a lot of assumptions about the data and the cost savings, and here we have an out-of-state doctor, and we have the department here, and they don't have the numbers or data or stats you're asking about. A lot of I believe, I don't think so, it should be, it might be, it depends. Clearly, there's not a lot of factual and hard information for Nevada being presented. This is being pitched as a race issue, an injustice issue, and a cost-saving issue for Nevada. But it's all been speculation, and for that reason, and the fact that there is not a problem here, we oppose the bill and ask you to do the same. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Spratley, please do not get off the phone. This is, I almost said Officer Monroe Moreno. It's Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno, and I have a question for you. You mentioned how this is Nevada and things are done differently here in Nevada. As we lived through COVID over the last year and DMV has not been able to get people their stickers in a timely manner, what have law enforcement been doing throughout the state during this period of time? What were those options in those rural communities that you mentioned? And as a Black woman that did wear a uniform, I was pulled over a number of times, not because of the sticker on my car, but simply because of the color of my skin. So I kind of take offense to some of the statements that you made. Thank you. Could you answer my question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, you can take offense. It's true, and we're trying to deal with it, right? That's why you guys are coming after the things that have proven to be problematic this session, and we're in agreement with that. We want to see reform throughout Nevada as well. So we're addressing that, but I don't think this decal system for stats that were brought up in North Carolina are true here. We have a data collection bill that we're trying to support, that it moves through the system so we can provide this legislative body the data that you're asking for, right? So we're trying to be cooperative partners in this, but here is a small decal. It seems like a small thing that is a good thing for public safety. We're able to look at a car and determine just very quickly, yes or no, is it something I want to look at further or is it not? And we don't always have radio traffic available that free that we can run a registration check on the radio or an MDT that can do it. So that little thing throughout Nevada, in the rural jurisdictions, as I said, and in the congested area as well. As for the pandemic, as the executive director for the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association, I did receive a request from the Department of Motor Vehicle asking to put out information to law enforcement statewide, which we did, because DMV during the pandemic had issues processing registrations, right? They were shut down for a long time. So we did. We put that out to our agency leaders, and we asked them for grace and mercy to registration violations for Nevada vehicles and even out-of-state vehicles. It didn't take away their ability to have probable cause to stop the vehicle, but we did see a decrease statewide in the number of stops that were being made, for obvious reasons, the contact part of it and going up to drivers. So there was a significant decrease. I don't have the numbers. I wasn't asked to provide any data, but we did see a decrease statewide for those reasons. And it was just a matter of grace and public safety. It's not always about enforcement or hammering people. It's about serving the public and making sure people are in compliance. So when we saw vehicles, and you're still seeing them running around in Vegas, Reno, Carson, throughout the rural, you see plates that are the white paper plates that are expired in July of last year, and people still haven't registered. I'm of the belief that DMV is now caught up to a point where that person should be registered, so that vehicle would probably be stopped today, regardless of their race, Madam Chair.
And I appreciate the fact that you did not have, and I don't believe I asked for data. I was wondering, my question was, what did police agencies do during this time period? And I was hoping that because you had planned to call in on this bill, you may have done the research and had that information in hand. So I'd like to thank you so much for calling in with your comments. I appreciate it. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 688. Please press *6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin.
My name is Michael Hansen, Michael Hansen, and I am the old-fashioned sort. I am merely a citizen of the state of Nevada. I am urging you to vote down this bill because there is no consideration of any second-order effects that this would have. Right now, having a sticker on your car, supposedly, that indicates whether it's got current registration or not, provides a flag to police officers, whether they choose to use it or not, that your vehicle may or may not be properly registered. If it's not registered, the officer has the discretion to pull the vehicle over or not. However, without having essentially a little tattletale on your rear end that says, I'm a scofflaw, the impetus to not register your vehicle also means you don't have to pay insurance on it, although you're supposed to. You do not have to have emissions inspections and standards, although you're supposed to. Yes, an officer in the best of worlds does have a way of checking a license plate if it suits his or her fancy, but there is no visual indication that they ought to unless they have reason to do it anyway. I think all of us know that there's a lot of cars on the highway and the roads. There are not a lot of police cars in comparison. If you increase the number of people who don't register their cars properly because they think they've got a pretty good chance of not getting caught, that means they're not probably going to have insurance because the mindsets go the same way. That is ultimately going to cause our insurance rates to go up. Anecdotally, I think everybody's pretty well aware Nevada has some of the highest insurance rates in the country. Personally, I did some research about moving up into the Salt Lake City metro area about 8 months ago. Quite literally, my insurance rates for the same coverage from the same company would be cut in half if I moved. That is a cost that would offset the income taxes I would have to pay in Utah if I lived in that state, which I don't in Nevada. I do not believe the savings are being accurately represented because the only immediate savings out of this thing once contracts expire is not having to have stickers. You're still going to have to mail registration slips to people who want them registered. Not everybody uses kiosks. Eventually, with the amendment, not having to send out second license plates. But the other impact of this is it would diametrically work against AB 349, which is
Mr.
designed
Hanson,
to
I'd like to thank
decrease
you for
emissions.
calling in. Mr. Hanson, you've reached your 3 minutes. I'd like to thank you for calling in. If you have anything else you'd like the committee to know, I encourage you to send it to us in writing. Thank you so much for your comments. You have a wonderful day. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 014. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes and may begin. Caller, I can see that you are unmuted. You may begin your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Reese. It's R-I-E-S on behalf of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I would first like to thank Assemblyperson Miller for speaking with us regarding this bill. Unfortunately, at this time, we are opposed to AB 379. I will be brief and will just echo Director Spratley's testimony as we share the same concerns that were brought up by the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Next caller.
Chair, we have no further callers in opposition to AB 379 at this time.
Thank you so much. Do we have any callers in the queue who wish to provide testimony in the neutral?
To provide testimony in neutral on Assembly Bill 379, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in neutral.
Thank you so much. Assemblyman Miller, do you have any closing comments?
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say it's my hope that this measure will reduce, do all the things that we've spoken about today. I'll keep it really short. I just want to say, look, we have all, change is difficult. It isn't always easy. It can be hard to accept and sometimes difficult to implement. But one thing we know for sure, change is inevitable. And I'd suggest the easiest changes to make are the ones we've already adjusted to. I want to thank all of everyone that helped me on this bill and all of my fellow presenters and those that were there for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 349. And we will open our work session with Assembly Bill 188, which abolishes the Commission on Special License Plate. I will turn things over to our committee policy analyst for discussion on this bill.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Katie Seaman, S-I-E-M-O-N, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 188 was first heard before this committee on March 16th, 2021, where it was presented by our fellow member, Assemblywoman Brown May. Assembly Bill 188 abolishes the Commission on Special License Plates and transfers its duties and approval procedure to the Department of Motor Vehicles, or DMV. The measure requires the DMV to hold public hearings to approve or disapprove applications for the design, preparation, and issuance of special license plates, and to compile and submit a list of each approved special license plate design with an accompanying report containing certain information to the legislature annually. The DMV may request the legislative auditor to conduct a review of a charitable organization to determine compliance with statutory requirements or whether an audit is reasonably necessary to assist in the administration of the program. One amendment has been received from Assemblywoman Danielle Monroe Moreno, the chair of both the committee and the commission. The amendment proposes that charitable organizations submit their financial information directly to the legislative auditor, rather than submit this information to the DMV, who would then transmit this information to the legislative auditor. Eliminating the DMV from the financial reporting process would allow the legislative auditor to provide the annual report by September 30th annually, rather than January 31st. 2 fiscal notes have been submitted for this measure. The DMV and the Legislative Council Bureau have determined that there is no fiscal impact from the measure as introduced. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, with that, I will entertain a motion from the committee to amend and do pass.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first from Assemblywoman Peters, a second from Assemblyman C.H. Miller. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will ask our committee secretary to conduct a roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblyman Levitt.
Yes.
Assemblyman Miller.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Yes.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Yes.
Assemblyman Watts.
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Yes.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Yes.
Chairman Ro Moreno.
And I am a yes. Then the motion passes. I will assign the floor statement to Assemblywoman Brown May.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And with that, we'll move on to the next item on our work session. It's Assembly Bill 281, which revises provisions governing the retention of certain records by short-term listers, brokers, and dealers of vehicles. I invite the committee policy analyst to discuss the measure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record again, Katie Seaman, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 281 was first heard before this committee on March 25th, 2021, where it was presented by its sponsor, Assemblyman C.H. Miller, joined by Sophia Romero, who is with the Legal Aid Society of Southern Nevada. Assembly Bill 281 removes the requirement that records containing the identity of short-term lessees and the duration of short-term vehicle leases be considered public records open to inspection by any member of the public. Records of a short-term lessor may be maintained electronically and, if so maintained, must be made available for inspection within 72 hours upon request by the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Department of Taxation, or local government employees for the purposes of determining compliance with local ordinances or business licensing requirements. The bill also authorizes dealers and brokers of motor vehicles to maintain their books and records electronically. There have been two conceptual amendments proposed. The first extending the time period short-term lessors have to produce electronic records upon request from 72 hours to 3 business days. The second provides for the production of electronic records of brokers and dealers of vehicles. There have been 2 fiscal notes received from the Departments of Motor Vehicles and Taxation. Both notes show no fiscal impact for the measure as introduced. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, with that, I will entertain a motion to amend and do pass.
So moved. Mr. Watts. Second.
I have a first from Assemblyman Watts and a second from Assemblyman Yeager. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will ask our committee secretary to conduct a roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblyman Levitt.
Yes.
Assemblyman Miller.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Yes.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Yes.
Assemblyman Watts.
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Yes.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Yes.
Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am a yes. And the motion passes. I will assign the floor statement to Assemblyman Watts. And that closes the work session on AB 281. And now I open the work session on Assembly Joint Resolution 7, which urges the Congress of the United States to pass the National Infrastructure Bank Act of 2020. Will our policy analysts please discuss the measure?
Thank you, Chair. Again, for the record, Katie Seaman, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Joint Resolution 7 was first heard before this committee on March 16, 2021, where it was presented by its primary sponsor, Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod, joined by State Treasurer Zach Conine and Ms. Elfeka Matardi, who is a macroeconomist with the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank. Assembly Joint Resolution 7 urges the Congress of the United States to pass the National Infrastructure Bank Act of 2020, which is also known as House Resolution 6422 of the 116th Congress. There has been one amendment that requests adding Assemblywoman Danielle Monroe Moreno as a non-primary sponsor to the measure, and there are no fiscal notes associated with this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I will entertain a motion to amend and do pass AJR 7.
So moved. Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you,
Second, Watts.
We have a first from Assemblywoman Peters, a second from Assemblyman Watts. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will ask our committee secretary to conduct a roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblyman Levitt.
Yes.
Assemblyman Miller.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Yes.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Yeah.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Yes.
Assemblyman Watts.
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Yes.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Yes.
Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am a yes. That motion passes, and I will assign the floor statement to Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. And that will close the work session on AJR 7 and open our final work session for today, which will be Assembly Bill 320, which revises provisions governing the operation of large all-terrain vehicles on certain roads and highways. And our policy analysts, you can begin at any time you're ready to discuss this measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Katie Seaman, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 320 was first heard before this committee on March 25th, 2021, where it was presented by the bill's sponsor, our own committee member, Assemblyman Levitt. Assembly Bill 320 permits the operation of a large all-terrain vehicle, or ATV, on a city street within cities having populations less than 25,000, or on a portion of a highway designated as a main county road if the large ATV satisfies requirements in existing law for safety equipment and registration with the Department of Motor Vehicles, and the governing body of the city or county having jurisdiction over the street or highway enacts an ordinance or resolution authorizing the operation of large ATVs on any portion of such a street or highway. There has been one amendment proposed by the bill's sponsor, which would make 4 changes. Number 1, authorize a city or county to prohibit the operation of a large ATV on any portion of a main county road in the city or county. Number 2, authorize a large ATV to operate on a street within a township whose population is less than 25,000. Number 3, remove the requirement that a city or county adopt an ordinance or resolution authorizing a large ATV to operate on a street or highway in its jurisdiction as a prerequisite to its operation. And number 4, provide a definition for large all-terrain vehicle within statute. There are no fiscal notes associated with this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, members, I will entertain a motion to amend and do pass.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a first from Assemblyman Wheeler.
I'll
Is there
second.
a second?
I'll second Assemblyman Miller.
We have a second from Assemblyman Miller. Is there any discussion on the motion? Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up with the bill sponsor if he's here. Hey, we talked about in the presentation the crossover of a highway and whether that would be cleared or a violation based on the language of the bill. Can you just clarify whether you got a better understanding of that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Glenn Levitt for the record. Yeah, we discovered, and I'm sorry I didn't clarify that for you, Assemblywoman Peters. We clarified that it's identified in the statute already, that it's permitted to cross over a highway. It's already in the statute. I apologize if I didn't make that clear during the presentation.
Yeah, great, thank you. Can you send me that reference?
You bet.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Watts, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and not intending to try and rehear the bill, but I did want to note that I and I think other members of the committee received a letter after the hearing from the Recreational Off-Highway Vehicle Association in opposition to the measure. And so I just wanted to see if the sponsor had any communication with them, if the amendment helped address any concerns with them. I just wanted to check in on that briefly.
I've not heard from them since the hearing where they proposed an amendment, which we included.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I don't have a question, but I did just want to say, originally I had some concerns, but I think what satisfied me on this amendment was that we're limiting it to places where the population is under 25,000. I just would have some concerns if we opened it up to larger municipalities. I think we've heard in this committee today about the issues that we have with traffic safety, pedestrians, and so forth. But I just wanted to thank the sponsor for that amendment, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you so much for those comments. Members, any other discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, I will ask our committee secretary to call a roll call vote.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblyman Levitt.
Yes.
Assemblyman Miller.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Yes.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Yes.
Assemblyman Watts.
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Yes.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Yes.
Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am a yes. The motion passes. I will assign that floor statement to Assemblyman Levitt. And that closes the work session for Assembly Bill 330. And it brings us to the last item on our agenda for today, and that is public comment. So I will ask our broadcast staff if we have anyone on the phone wishing to make public comment.
To provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no callers wishing to testify in public comment at this time.
Thank you so much. Seeing that there's no individuals in the queue for public comment, that will conclude today's meeting. And I would like to thank the presenters, our committee members, and our broadcast staff, who is always amazing. As I said at the onset of our meeting, we're at a time in our legislative session where things get a little hectic and schedules are changed. Our next meeting will be scheduled for Tuesday, April 6th, and it will be scheduled at the call of the chair. The latest the meeting will start will be 1 p.m., the absolute latest. I'm hoping to be able to start a little bit earlier, but please, members, pay attention to your emails. You will get the notification as soon as I can get it to you when our meeting will start. And with that, this meeting is adjourned, and I wish you all a wonderful day.